Most people cross paths with thousands of others in a lifetime. But only a handful show up at the exact moment when everything shifts. The colleague who offers a job the week you are about to quit, the stranger who hands you a phone number that becomes a lifeline, the old friend who reaches out right after a breakup. Those moments feel like more than coincidence. It can feel like fate. And that feeling makes us look for patterns, because when timing matches need we instinctively try to explain why and how, tracing back every choice and conversation to find a cause. Yet explanation is possible without mysticism. Often the reason is narrower and simpler than destiny. Networks, habits, and tiny choices create openings. The meetup you joined because you were curious, the mutual friend who mentioned your name at a party, the late message that reached someone who was awake and ready to help, and those small causes put the right person in your path. Small causes, visible effects. That still leaves a question. How do you tell luck from signal? In the next few minutes, you'll hear 3 real stories and clear patterns that show how timing, proximity, and readiness combine. So surprising meetings stop feeling random and start feeling meaningful. Patterns and coincidence. Reading the small signals. A stranger appears the morning you decide to change careers, and it can feel uncanny. The human brain is wired to spot patterns. That wiring is not a metaphor but a basic cognitive trait known to scientists as pattern recognition, and it often shows up as apophenia or pareidolia when we see meaningful connections where none were intended. People notice a song on repeat just as they feel a shift, and that repetition lodges in memory more strongly than the many other songs they heard that week. That stronger memory creates a sense of meaning, even though the underlying cause might be simple repetition and salience. A cluster of small coincidences can feel like a breadcrumb trail. With thousands of daily events across social circles and media, the law of truly large numbers predicts that unlikely overlaps will occur simply by chance, and temporal clustering makes those overlaps seem connected when they happen close together. For example, seeing the same license plate twice in a day is surprising in the moment, but over months of commuting many plates will repeat. The surprise comes from the timing, not from any cosmic signal. Confirmation bias then locks those incidents in place. The few matches you notice get remembered, while mismatches fade. Weak ties and casual contacts make many of those coincidences practically useful. Social science research on network structure shows that acquaintances and one-off interactions are often the source of new information, because they connect you to otherwise separate circles. A message from an old classmate after years can therefore produce a job lead that your close friends never mentioned. A concrete example is a person who reconnects with a former coworker at a neighborhood fundraiser and learns about an open role. The coincidence is not mystical. It's network topology turning a rare intersection into an opportunity. Context matters too. Being in a phase where you're mentally scanning for change increases the odds that a weak tie will land at the right time. Small signals act like prompts more than prophesize. Noticing repeated themes in conversations, seeing the same name crop up in articles you read, or being approached by the same recruiter multiple times tends to push people toward exploring a possibility. And that exploration often produces more information that either confirms or disconfirms the initial impression. There are costs when coincidence is treated as causation. Hasty moves based on a single pattern can lead to regret, but there are also clear benefits when those patterns are checked against alternatives and context. In practice, most meaningful outcomes come from combining the raw chance of encounters with deliberate follow-up. What looks like fate is usually a mix of probability, attention, connection, and a little bit of timing. Needs, readiness, and the invisible push. There's a strange pattern. When a need sharpens, the world seems to rearrange itself to show you solutions. Our brains filter incoming information to match what matters to us, driven by neural systems like the reticular activating system that prioritize relevant stimuli. So if you're suddenly focused on finding a mentor, you'll notice people at meetups who you skimmed over before, and you'll get referred by someone who hears you talking about it. The neurological spotlight doesn't create the mentor out of thin air. It simply makes the mentor visible amid the noise, and that visibility makes contact far more likely. Sometimes the timing isn't about desire but about readiness, and readiness is quieter than wanting. When someone has actually updated a portfolio, rewritten their bio, or started saying first M looking out loud, their behavior sends signals. Recruiters respond to updated profiles. Colleagues pass along openings when you start mentioning plans. One concrete example, a friend who finally completed a professional certificate began networking differently. She messaged 2 alumni, attended an industry webinar, and within weeks a former classmate emailed an opening that fit. Her readiness changed how others interpreted her, and that interpretation produced an opportunity. Small actions act like a nudge you barely feel, yet those nudges compound into what looks like fate. Algorithms amplify this effect. Search for backpacking gear and the next day sponsored posts and forum replies show up in your feeds. Offline, the same thing happens through social momentum. You volunteer for a community project and a neighbor who runs a non-profit spots you, remembers your name, and later offers a collaboration. The push is often invisible because it's distributed. Many tiny moves by you and by others, and suddenly someone arrives at your door with a solution you needed. The moment feels precise because need, readiness, and push converge. You might be emotionally open, have made practical preparations, and simultaneously drop hints that the right person's social network picks up. That alignment explains why relationships and opportunities can seem serendipitous. A tutor appears when you're struggling in a subject and you've started asking classmates for tips. A romantic interest turns up in a hobby group just after you committed to showing up weekly. Cause leads to effect. Your internal state changes how you act. Your action sends signals, and those signals attract responses. It's not magic. It's a chain reaction that starts with a need and finishes when someone notices. Shared paths and social geometry. People who take the same train or walk the same block every day end up becoming part of each other's story. A few months of shared timing make strangers recognizable, and recognition leads to short conversations that add up. One commuter who chatted about a side project on a Monday eventually received an introduction to a programmer from the same car on Thursday. Because the route is fixed and repeatable, small exchanges become reliable signals of interest and competence. The shape of where you spend time matters as much as how often you spend it. City transit lines, university buildings, office layouts, and even a popular cafe create concentrated zones where lives overlap. Two students from different majors might pick the same elective, meet in a study group, and later start a research collaboration because that class put them in the same physical and social space. In practical terms, overlapping schedules and shared locations compress the distance between relevant skills and opportunities. Some people act like bridges between separate circles, and they change the odds of meeting someone useful. An organizer of a local meetup or a barista who remembers faces often links different groups together without much fanfare. A freelance designer met at a co-working mixer once introduced a startup founder to a client, simply because she knew both worlds and saw a fit. That pattern, weak ties carrying new information, explains why acquaintances matter more for new opportunities than close friends do. Life shifts rewrite the map of your encounters, so the people who appear next are often a product of new rhythms. Becoming a parent opens up playgrounds, classes, and parent groups where other caregivers show up with practical knowledge and mutual needs. Changing jobs moves you into different buildings and meeting patterns, which brings new collaborators and mentors into your orbit. Technology layers at occasional spikes, events and apps concentrate people briefly, but the steady geometry of where you are and when you are there does most of the work in determining who turns up at the right moment. Serendipity versus design, when chance feels like destiny. Many people notice that someone shows up exactly when they need them, and psychologists point to apophenia and confirmation bias as reasons we glue meaning onto those moments. It feels uncanny because our brains are built to find patterns. A single helpful encounter stands out against a background of forgettable interactions and suddenly feels orchestrated. For example, you might recall the one coffee chat that led to a job referral and forget the dozen other casual talks that went nowhere, which is exactly how selective attention and memory make chance look like destiny. The effect is simple. You remember the hit and ignore all the misses, and the story you tell afterward highlights connection rather than coincidence. At the same time, many of those encounters are products of predictable systems. Routines, shared networks, and even algorithms push people together. Your commute, your industry meetups, your friend circle and social feeds create overlap. So a random conversation at a conference is often just the visible tip of an invisible web of contacts and contexts. Consider someone who meets a future collaborator at a workshop. The workshop itself was chosen because of shared interests, so the meeting was more likely than it felt. Algorithms do something similar online by surfacing profiles or posts that match your behavior, increasing the chance of a surprising match that was actually engineered by design. Readiness matters as much as context, which is why the same coincidence can mean different things to different people. If you have a polished portfolio and a clear ask ready, a chance encounter with an industry person can become a project, whereas without preparation it remains an anecdote. Think about the person who had a 1-minute pitch ready at a social event and later turned that exchange into a funding conversation. The moment wasn't magic so much as opportunity plus preparation. In short, timing collides with capability, and that collision is what turns randomness into a life-altering hinge. Narrative and hindsight stitch the pieces together afterwards, and that stitching often turns mundane causes into grand design. When you tell the story of meeting your partner at a bookstore, you emphasize fate and ignore the fact that you both bought the same obscure poetry book because you share a hobby and live in the same neighborhood. Hindsight bias smooths the messy process of probability into a neat plot where everything led inevitably to the present. The practical reality sits between pure chance and deliberate design. Networks, habits, timing, and interpretation all push and pull, and the sense of destiny usually comes from the way we organize those elements into a story that feels right. Mutual opportunity, how people fit each other's moments. People often cross paths because their needs line up at a particular moment. Sometimes those crossings happen because each person carries something the other needs at that exact stage: a skill, a schedule, a sympathetic ear, and circumstances like a new role, a relocation, or a shared project push them into the same contexts. The fit can be very practical. For example, a software engineer shifting into product work might meet a designer at a company hackathon. The engineer needs design thinking to ship a prototype, and the designer needs a technical partner to turn mock-ups into code, so they pair up and produce something neither could alone. It feels awkward when favors flow only one way. Mutuality prevents that from souring the connection because both people bring distinct, usable value to the table: information, access, time, or an emotional resource, and they trade it in ways that matter. Think of a small business owner who needs customers and a local blogger who needs stories. When the owner provides a behind-the-scenes tour and the blogger promotes the shop, both gain traction without draining either side. That reciprocity creates momentum, because each person sees concrete returns: more customers, better content, shared workloads. The relationship moves beyond convenience into a productive partnership. The window for a good fit often closes faster than you expect. Life shifts, and the exact circumstance that made someone indispensable can vanish when schedules change or priorities pivot. A college project partner can be a lifesaver during finals because deadlines compress and skills align. But after graduation, different cities and jobs disperse the overlap, and the connection either adapts or fades. Timing, not just intent, dictates whether mutual opportunity endures. Since opportunity relies on external constraints like availability and shared objectives, only relationships where both parties recreate overlap or let the need evolve into a deeper tie survive. You notice the difference between one-sided help and true mutual fit quickly. It shows in small behaviors like reciprocal time commitments, introductions made without prompting, or both people rearranging plans to support a shared outcome. When two neighbors swap tools and babysitting equally, or when a lab technician is routinely credited and recommended by a researcher, those concrete exchanges cement trust and future collaboration. Because tangible give and take produces results: projects launched, stress reduced, networks expanded. People who meet at precise moments often turn that fleeting alignment into something that lasts well beyond the original need. Taking credit, how we tell the story after the fact. You notice the name at the top of the email or the voice that speaks first in the meeting, and that often becomes the story everyone tells afterward. People tend to reconstruct what happened in a way that makes their role look central. Because memory is not a videotape but a narrative people piece together, details shift to fit the picture they want to present. For example, a junior analyst drops an idea in a hallway conversation. It